My name is Callum Drayton. I built a $25 million company from scratch, while my wife and my father were planning to bury me beneath it. It started with a phone, just a simple repair. But when the technician showed me that screen, I realized the people I trusted most weren't just lying. They were waiting for the right moment to erase me. And the worst part? They almost did. But I didn't disappear. I fought back. And what I did next made them wish I had died quietly. It was late afternoon when I pulled into that narrow strip mall off North Central Expressway in Dallas. The sky hung low, gray, heavy, waiting to break open. I remember thinking how strange it felt to have this much silence after a day full of meetings. My father had called that morning, asking me to drop off his phone at a repair shop because it kept freezing. Nothing unusual, I thought. I'd done it before. The shop was small, tucked between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled faintly of solder. A middle-aged Hispanic man looked up from behind the counter. His name tag read Reyes. "Evening," I said, setting the phone down. "It's for my father, Russell Drayton." He nodded, wiped his hands, and plugged the phone in. "Won't take long," he said quietly. But his fingers hesitated as the screen lit up. Something changed in his face. His posture stiffened. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he scrolled. For a moment, I thought he was just confused by some software glitch. Then he exhaled sharply and looked at me. "Sir," he whispered, voice trembling. "Cancel every card you have and leave. Now." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned the screen toward me. And just like that, my world narrowed to a few glowing lines of text. It was a message thread between my wife, Marlena, and my father. Her words burned through me. "Plan B will look like a heart attack. After the transfer clears, you'll be free." The phrase appeared again in another text, and another, each one time-stamped the night before. I felt my throat dry up. Plan B will look like a heart attack. The first thought that came to mind was absurd. Maybe they were joking. Maybe it was code for something business-related. My father was old school, harsh but not cruel. Marlena, she could be cold, but murder? No. I looked closer. The next message was worse. "He'll never see it coming. He trusts you both completely." The phone buzzed in Reyes's hand, and both of us jumped. He immediately unplugged it, pulled the battery. His hands shook slightly. "Sir," he said again, more urgent now, "this isn't a misunderstanding. Your bank accounts, your GPS, they can trace every move you make." I tried to laugh, but my voice cracked. "You can't be serious." "Check your account," he insisted. So I did. I opened my banking app. The screen blinked twice and displayed one word: frozen. That's when my stomach turned cold. All my cards, my business funds, everything locked in seconds. The silence between us thickened. Outside, the first drops of rain hit the window. Reyes rubbed his temple. "I shouldn't have opened it," he muttered, "but I can't let someone walk out blind to this." I nodded slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You didn't do anything wrong?" But my voice didn't sound like mine. It was hollow. I walked out, clutching that phone like a piece of evidence. The air outside was dense with humidity. Lightning cracked over the skyline, and the smell of wet asphalt filled my lungs. I stood there, rain beginning to soak through my shirt, watching the reflection of my own face ripple in the puddles. Everything I thought I knew, my father, my wife, my family, felt like a story someone else had written. I tried to breathe, but it felt like my ribs refused to move. How long had they planned this? How many family dinners had been nothing more than rehearsals? I thought of Marlena's smile that morning. Tight, polite, almost rehearsed. And my father's call from his office. "You're handling too much, son. Maybe take a few days off." They were lining up the pieces even then. I wanted to drive home, confront them both, demand an explanation. But another thought struck me. If what Reyes said was true, they'd already know where I was headed. The rain came harder, pooling around my shoes. I looked down at the phone again, that glowing rectangle of betrayal, and whispered to no one. It wasn't paranoia. It was precision. I turned the phone off and slipped it into my jacket pocket. For a few seconds, I just stood there, breathing in the damp air, trying to decide whether to call the police, a lawyer, or just disappear. Thunder rolled overhead, deep and slow, like a warning drum. I walked toward my car, each step heavier than the last. The world felt smaller. Every streetlight, every passing car, suddenly suspicious. I opened the driver's door and sat behind the wheel. My hands hovered over the ignition. In that moment, I realized I wasn't repairing my father's phone. I was holding the evidence of my own murder. I started the car, but every route home suddenly felt like a trap. So I didn't go home, not right away. I drove to the nearest gas station 2 blocks from the gated community where we lived, left the car parked behind the building, and walked the last half mile in a slow drizzle, hood up, phone off, shoes soaked through. Halfway there, my phone buzzed once, even though I'd powered it down. I glanced. The screen was dark, dead. But a notification flashed anyway, just long enough to see it. "Your vehicle is in motion." My steps froze. I was on foot. The car I'd left parked was supposed to be still. I turned around, half expecting to see it rolling past the corner. Nothing. Just the sound of a distant train and rain tapping on mailboxes. I looked up and whispered, "They're already moving." I shoved the phone deep into my jacket and kept walking, cutting through the side entrance of the neighborhood. No security guard, no patrol, just a keypad and a wet palm pressing numbers I'd memorized years ago. I didn't go through the front door. I used the side gate, the one Marlena always left open for the pool guy. It felt safer somehow, more hidden, less expected. The house glowed warm from the inside. Porch lights on, kitchen light humming, curtains slightly parted. From the outside, we looked like a perfectly normal couple wrapping up dinner and settling in for a show. But stepping inside, something in the air told me otherwise. The scent hit first, her perfume, the kind she only wore when she was dressing for someone, not me. I towed my shoes off quietly, letting the rainwater pool around the mat. The kitchen was spotless, but the silence was off. The fridge buzzed. Nothing else, no TV, no footsteps upstairs. Still, every hair on my arm stood like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. 2 wine glasses sat on the kitchen counter. Stemless, identical. Except one had a slight shimmer at the bottom, like chalk dust swirling in red. I picked it up, sniffed. Bitter. Not wine. Crushed pills. She'd set it out for me. I turned to the dining table. A manila folder lay open, papers spread out like a presentation. "Estate consolidation plan," the cover read in gold foil. I flipped through. Page after page. My name, Russell Drayton Jr., was missing, scratched out, replaced, or never there to begin with. Where it should have said co-founder, it now read executive advisor, retired. I'd been erased on paper before I was even out of the room. I heard the staircase creak behind me. I didn't turn. "Hey," Marlena said from the stairs, her voice smooth. tired but not surprised. She wore a silk robe, holding a glass of water like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're home early." I turned slowly. "Yeah, traffic wasn't bad." I kept my tone even. My hands casually dipped into my jacket, pushing the phone deeper into the inner pocket. She walked down a few more steps. "You look pale." "Long day?" "Long enough." I forced a breath out through my nose. "Just tired, I guess." Her eyes scanned me, not lovingly, strategically, measuring, like someone watching a pot to see if it might boil over. "I was about to shower," she said, as if nothing was wrong. "Want something to eat?" "I grabbed something earlier." She nodded. "Okay, I'll be up in a bit." I nodded back, then turned and walked calmly to my office. Closed the door, locked it quietly, stared at the wood for a beat, then moved fast. I slid the USB from the drawer and connected it to my work computer. My hands moved on instinct. Click, select, drag. Financial records, internal emails, contracts, call logs. Everything they might twist, delete, hide, I copied all of it. A framed photo sat on my desk. Me, Marlena, my dad, smiling at the ribbon cutting for our company's new headquarters last year. His hand rested on my shoulder. I remember now. It felt heavy, not proud. Halfway through the transfer, my screen blinked. Then again. The webcam light flickered on. I froze. The cursor moved on its own. Someone was in the system. I reached for the cable and yanked it from the wall. The screen froze on the last image. Me, sitting at my desk. On the corner of the screen, a message appeared in bold white letters. "Stay still." I stared at the words, then at the unplugged cable, then back at the screen. They weren't watching me. They were in everything. I stood up, grabbed the USB, shoved it into my sock, then the phone. Jacket zipped. I whispered the only thing I could think of, something I once told a younger employee who froze during a board meeting. "Cancel fear." That's when I heard them. Footsteps, slow, steady, right outside the door. The doorknob turned, slow and deliberate, as if whoever it was already knew I wouldn't scream. I stepped back, holding my breath. The lock gave way with a soft click, and the door creaked open an inch. At first, I thought it was Marlena, that she'd grown tired of pretending and decided to end the charade right here, right now. But the shadow that filled the frame was too tall, too solid. When the figure stepped inside, the faint light from my monitor caught a man's face I'd never seen before. He wore dark clothes, damp from the rain, and carried a flashlight and a small black case. The beam swept across the room, pausing briefly on the floor before stopping on me. "Mr. Drayton?" His voice was low, cautious. "I'm Jared, home security tech. Your system sent an alert. Your wife said I should stop by." I swallowed hard. "At midnight?" He gave a quick, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She said it was urgent. Sensor in the west hallway." Outside, thunder rolled again, followed by a flicker of the backyard floodlight through the blinds. It made the shadows in the room twitch and stretch. Before I could answer, Marlena's voice drifted down the stairs. "Is everything okay down there?" Jared glanced up, his tone suddenly more relaxed, like he'd just been caught doing something ordinary. "All fine, ma'am. Just checking the connection." My chest tightened. She knew he was here. The air between us thickened. I looked at his hands, gloved, spotless, too careful for a man who supposedly handled wiring all day. Then I noticed the faint red mark on his wrist, half hidden by the cuff. It was a tattoo, clean lines forming the insignia of Drayton Protective Services, my father's private security firm. He caught me looking and quickly pulled his sleeve down. "Coffee?" I asked, forcing my tone to stay even. He blinked, caught off guard. Sure." I walked toward the kitchen, keeping him in my peripheral vision. Every movement I made felt choreographed, meant to look calm while my pulse hammered against my ribs. I poured 2 mugs, handed him one, and quietly slid the USB drive into my pocket, along with my father's phone. He watched the motion. His gaze lingered on my coat pocket a beat too long. "You must work late," I said. He shrugged. "Depends who's calling." "Your boss must trust you." That faint smirk again. "Only with certain jobs." He took a sip of coffee, then set the mug down without drinking. His gloves never left his hands. "Mind if I take a look at the panel in your office?" "Go ahead." He turned, flashlight cutting through the hallway. The beam brushed across family photos on the wall. Me as a kid beside my father, smiling like we had the same blood in our veins instead of oil and water. When Jared knelt near the wall, he accidentally dropped his flashlight. It rolled toward me, the beam spinning across the carpet. The black case he carried tipped, open, just enough for me to see what was inside. Not tools, a small vial, a syringe. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up. His eyes were already on me. We didn't move for several seconds. The rain outside sounded louder, like it was closing in. Then Marlena's voice came again, closer now. "Is he still there?" Jared's jaw tightened. He lowered his tone to a whisper. "She said you'd make this easy." Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the nearest thing, the coffee mug, and threw it at his face. The liquid hit his cheek, steaming against the glove as he shouted and stumbled backward. I bolted toward the back door, slipping once on the tile before shoving it open. Cold air hit me like a slap. The rain poured hard now, soaking my shirt within seconds. Behind me, Jared's voice echoed through the kitchen. "You don't understand. This isn't about money." I didn't stop to find out what it was about. I sprinted barefoot across the patio, the stones slick beneath my feet. The night was all motion and noise, rain, thunder, and the pounding of my heart. I reached the hedge line, crouched low, trying to breathe quietly. My hands shook as I clutched the USB and the phone. The world spun in fragments, light, shadow, betrayal. "My father's hands built my first company," I whispered to myself. Now those same hands had signed my death warrant. A pair of headlights appeared through the curtain of rain, slowing as they approached my driveway. The car door opened with a mechanical groan. A man stepped out, holding an umbrella. Even from across the yard, I recognized the stance, the deliberate way he moved. My father. He stood there calmly, scanning the house as if nothing were wrong. Then he looked straight in my direction and smiled, warm, confident, patient, like a man who'd already won. My father didn't come to save me. He came to finish the job. I ran before he could call my name. My legs moved faster than my thoughts, faster than the panic building in my chest. The rain blurred the world around me, and my bare feet tore through gravel, wet grass, and rusted fencing as if I didn't feel a thing. But I did feel something, just not in my body. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, that quiet, pulsing ache of betrayal, of knowing someone who once taught me how to ride a bike could now be the one quietly preparing my grave. I kept running, through back alleys, down empty roads slick with oil and rain, cutting across a construction yard until I found myself under a half-collapsed chain-link gate. I ducked beneath it, breath ragged, and stumbled into a forgotten part of the city where warehouses slept like old ghosts along the Trinity River. One of the buildings had a back entrance cracked open, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. No signs, no lights, just the deep hum of silence inside. I pushed through and let the darkness swallow me. My clothes clung to my skin like regret. I leaned against a steel beam, panting, the phone and USB drive still clenched in my grip. My hands were trembling. My breath came out in bursts. I didn't feel my feet anymore, only the sound of each exhale, counting every lie I'd ever believed. In that suffocating stillness, a memory came back. My father's voice, firm, timeless. 1 year ago, standing in his office telling me, "Family is legacy. You protect it, or you're nothing." Back then, I thought it meant unity, loyalty, blood that binds. Now I knew better. It meant control, power, silence. I was always the soft one, the youngest, the one they left out of the room during real decisions. They said I was too idealistic, too emotional. Marlena used to touch my cheek and say I had a gentle heart, like it was a flaw she'd tolerated. I found an old outlet tied to a generator socket in the corner of the warehouse. The light above it flickered, buzzing. I plugged in the phone, crouched beside it like it was a lifeline, and waited for the screen to light up. When it did, I opened the messages again. My fingers scrolled slower this time, deliberate. There were voice memos. I hadn't seen them before. My stomach turned. The first one was my father's voice, steady, chillingly calm. We let it look like a stress collapse. No marks, no alarms. Everyone knows he's been working insane hours. He skips meals. He drinks coffee like water. It'll be believable. Then Marlena's voice, trembling, controlled. I can't be there when it happens. I don't want to see him. You won't. You'll handle the asset transfers. I'll take care of the rest. My thumb hovered over the screen. The rain outside pounded the metal roof above me like war drums. I closed my eyes and listened to that silence inside me, the kind that screams louder than anything. They didn't just plan to take my company. They planned to erase my existence, wipe me out clean, like I was never meant to be part of their world in the first place. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I didn't move to catch it. Instead, I leaned back and let the tears fall. No sobbing, no sound, just a quiet stream down my cheeks, blending with the rainwater on my skin. Years of obedience, years of playing the loyal son, the devoted husband, the man who built a tech empire from a laptop and a second-hand desk while they smiled behind champagne flutes. I stood up, slowly, walked to the nearest wall, and slammed my fist into it, again and again, until my knuckles cracked and bled. The pain grounded me. A rusted shelf nearby held an old mirror with a broken frame. I caught my reflection. Wild eyes, wet hair, bruised soul. I saw the wedding ring on my hand. Marlena once told me, while sliding it on, "Silver means loyalty." That's why I chose it. We'll never lie to each other. I pulled it off. The cold band resisted, then slid free. I stared at it for a second. Then I walked outside, into the rain, and through it with all the force I had left. The faint ting as it hit the pavement echoed like a shot in my chest. That was the moment I stopped being their son, or her husband. I walked back inside, soaked, opened my laptop, and inserted the USB. It booted up with a familiar whir. Inside, neatly archived, were all the documents I'd backed up. Contracts, statements, security protocols. But one folder caught my eye. Encrypted records, hidden accounts, transfers that dated back months. My father had already been moving funds out of the company into offshore trusts under Marlena's name. They weren't just preparing for my death. They had already started living off it. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I felt hollow. Then the anger came, cold and clean. If they wanted my silence, I whispered, they're about to hear it louder than ever. But I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Not without knowing the full scope. Not without leverage. I needed names, timelines, patterns, proof beyond screenshots. I pulled out a scrap of cardboard and started scribbling with a half-dead pen. Names of people who used to believe in me. Old engineers I'd mentored. The lawyer who once warned me about my prenup. My brother, David, estranged for years, but never stupid. The warehouse shuddered as thunder cracked overhead. And that's when my phone buzzed. One message from an unknown number. They know where you are. I didn't wait to read the rest. I just ran. The screen's glow barely faded before I shoved the phone into my jacket and bolted through the side exit of the warehouse. Every nerve in my body fired like alarm bells. I didn't know who sent that message, but I believed it. The street outside was empty, but the kind of empty that feels watched. Rain still drizzled from the dark sky, thin sheets falling at an angle. My shoes were long gone. My soles slapped wet concrete, burning from debris I no longer noticed. Each slap echoed louder than the last. Every step sounded like footsteps behind me. I turned the corner, weaving through the skeletal frame of what once was a bus terminal. Trash rustled, metal creaked, shadows flickered. I thought I saw a figure to my left, then nothing. Just darkness, silence, and the thudding of my own chest. A soft hum behind me. I looked back as a black SUV rounded the bend, no headlights, creeping slowly. No plate visible. I ducked low and sprinted through a narrow alley. It opened into a cracked asphalt lot, surrounded by a crumbling multi-level parking garage. I darted inside, the structure swallowing me with its concrete ribs. I climbed the ramp, fast and quiet, heart racing. A rusted vending machine gave me cover on the second floor. I crouched low, rain dripping from the roof's broken edges. The phone buzzed again. I flinched. My thumb hesitated, but I checked it. We don't want to hurt you. We just want what's ours. Attached was a photo of me, taken from across the street, from minutes ago, in the warehouse. I stared at it, the color draining from my face. They were tracking me, not by my phone. I'd turned off GPS hours ago. I dug through my jacket pocket and felt the cold metal of my smartwatch. My father had given it to me last Christmas, said it was to keep me healthy. I ripped it off, smashed it underfoot, tossed the shattered pieces down into the street. The SUV slowed beneath the structure, its engine idle, waiting. I slid behind a support beam and forced myself to breathe slower. Think. Don't panic. They knew every habit I had, even how I ran. My own life was their playbook. My father didn't need guns. He had people. Marlena had information. I was the prize they knew better than I knew myself. I stayed there for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. Time got slippery. A phrase floated back to me, something my mentor, Olivia Trent, told me during a legal battle 5 years ago. They can track your moves, not your mind. I pulled out the USB and jogged down to the street level. A small diner nearby was just closing. The lights flickered as the cook flipped the closed sign, but their Wi-Fi was still on. I huddled behind a row of newspaper dispensers and connected through a secured VPN. Logged into a private server I hadn't touched since before I sold my first patent. Back when I still thought loyalty came before leverage, I started uploading everything. Every file, every voice memo, every transfer document I'd recovered. If they wanted war, I whispered, I'd start it with the truth. The bar of progress inched forward. I kept my head down. No sirens, no shouts, just the soft crackle of electricity and my breath fogging in the air. Then the phone rang. Blocked number. I hesitated. Let it ring once, twice. Then answered. Callum? The voice was female. Familiar. It's June. Don't speak. Just listen. June Emerson. My former CFO. My father fired her last year without explanation. I hadn't spoken to her since. I know what they're doing, she said. I've seen the paperwork. Marlena was made proxy owner of the parent account 6 months ago. They've been bleeding funds ever since. I glanced behind me. The SUV was gone, or hiding. Where are you? Meet me by sunrise, she said. Elm and Carpenter. Use no credit. Bring nothing they can trace. Why now? I asked. Her voice cracked slightly. Because I should have warned you sooner. The line went dead. I didn't trust easily anymore. But her voice, it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded scared. I started walking, slow at first, past the diner, toward the orange glow of city lights bleeding through the mist. Every streetlight flickered like it might die next. I didn't feel hope. What I felt was exhaustion that finally found direction. And then my foot struck something small, metallic. I looked down. A crushed silver ring glinted on the wet sidewalk. Bent, scratched, but familiar. I bent down and picked it up. Marlena's ring. She once said silver meant loyalty. That was her word, her charm. I stared at it in my hand, then whispered to the night. Loyalty's just a story we tell to sleep at night. I let it fall back to the street and walked on. When I reached the rendezvous point, June wasn't alone, and the man beside her was someone I never thought I'd see again. It was my brother, Samuel, the one who disappeared 10 years ago. I stood in the doorway of the diner like the wind had punched through me. The rain had let up, but my clothes clung to me, soaked and heavy, and suddenly I felt weightless in the worst way. My throat locked up. My knees, they nearly buckled. June glanced between us, her voice low but urgent. You two have a lot to catch up on. Samuel didn't move. He just sat at the back booth, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was something sacred. His hair was longer than I remembered, peppered with gray now, and there were lines in his face that didn't belong to the brother I buried in my mind a decade ago. You're supposed to be dead, I said, the words scraping out of my chest. He raised his eyes slowly, calm, steady. That's what Father wanted you to believe. I didn't know if I should scream or throw something, or just sit down before I collapsed. I chose the last one. My hands were still trembling, but it wasn't the rain or the chase. It was this moment. The silence between us held a decade of betrayal, confusion, and unanswered grief. He took a breath and leaned forward. I didn't leave because of you. I left because I found out what Dad was doing. Offshore accounts, shell companies, defense contracts hidden behind medical tech fronts. He wasn't building a legacy. He was laundering one. You faked your death? I whispered. He helped me disappear. Samuel nodded toward June. Once I had enough proof to make him sweat, I knew he'd do whatever it took to keep me quiet. I shook my head. You couldn't just call me? You let me grieve. For 10 years, Sam. He looked down at the table. He would have used you against me. You were still under his thumb. June added quietly. Your father's patterns don't change, Callum. First he isolates you. Then he convinces you that only he knows what's best. Then he starts replacing parts of your life until you don't know who you are anymore. My voice cracked. And Marlena? Samuel looked me dead in the eye. She was always part of the plan. She wasn't your wife, Cal. She was the transition. Once you proved your worth, she was going to help take it. My chest tightened. The silence in the room didn't feel empty. It felt loud. Loud with all the words I never got to say at Samuel's funeral. Loud with everything I gave up just to be seen. You left me there with him, I said through clenched teeth. I built that company with blood and years, thinking maybe if I did enough, I'd finally matter. He didn't flinch. You always mattered. That's why he wanted to control you. Those words landed harder than any punch I'd taken, because deep down, some part of me still wanted my father's approval, even now, after knowing he signed off on killing me. We sat like that for a minute. No one moved. The waitress refilled a coffee pot and glanced our way, but knew better than to interrupt. Then June opened her bag and slid a folder across the table. These are copies of everything we have. Email trails, signed authorizations, encrypted audio logs. You were being set up months ago. I flipped through it slowly. Names I recognized. Fund transfers disguised as consulting payments. And there, at the bottom of one page, Marlena's signature next to an ownership clause I never signed. Samuel leaned in. He's not just after your company, Cal. He's been securing private defense bids through shadow partnerships. If he succeeds, this won't just be about you. He'll own something no civilian should. It stopped being about revenge in that moment. It became something else, something bigger. June pulled out a small drive. This contains audio of your father instructing Marlena how to handle the transition. He never says kill, but it's clear enough for someone in law enforcement. I looked up. We go to the feds? Samuel shook his head. He has people in the system. You go through the front door and the evidence disappears. Or you do. So then what? We bait him, Samuel said simply. Publicly. Force him to act. Make the lie unsustainable. I let out a breath. It felt like stepping into another life. Then Samuel reached into his coat pocket and slid something across the table. It clinked softly against the wood. A silver ring, identical to the one I threw into the gutter. You lost yours, he said. I kept mine. It reminded me that not all loyalty is fake. I stared at it. It was scratched, weathered, but real. I picked it up. Not to wear it. Not yet. But to hold on to something that wasn't soaked in lies. I met his eyes. Okay, we do this together. And that's when June's phone lit up. One new message. They know you're together. The message had barely finished lighting up June's screen when the world split open. The diner windows exploded inward before any of us could react. The blast was fast, brutal, a wave of heat and sound that tore the air apart. I didn't have time to think, only move. I hit the floor hard, my shoulder slamming into the tile. Plates shattered above us. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine, like silence had been stretched too thin and snapped. I reached out, fingers groping through smoke, and caught June's arm, yanking her behind the counter. Samuel was already crawling toward the back. His voice was raw, panicked. They found us! Move! Flames curled up from where the booths had been. The neon signs flickered wildly, sputtering like they were suffocating. Smoke wrapped the room in a suffocating gray shroud. A second later, the screech of tires outside. Then the unmistakable thud of doors slamming open. Two men, tall, masked, armed, stepped into the chaos. June clutched my sleeve. Your father doesn't want you alive, Callum. He wants this erased. I didn't argue. There was no time. Samuel knocked over a row of chairs, and I pulled June along the floor, each movement a gamble. The attackers moved slowly through the smoke, their guns raised, shouting to each other over the fire. We ducked through the kitchen, slipping behind overturned shelves. I saw a maintenance door near the back, half open, rusted hinges screaming as the wind pushed it. I shoved June through it first, then Samuel. "Go," I hissed. "I'll buy you time." June tried to protest, but I was already moving the other way. My hand closed around a broken pipe, still hot from the blast. I crouched beside the sink, yanked the emergency release valve on the fire suppression system. A burst of steam erupted, clouding the air even more. I could hear one of the men coming closer. His steps were cautious, deliberate. I held my breath. When he came into view, I didn't hesitate. I swung the pipe with everything I had. It collided with a dull crack. He dropped. The other one turned and ran as the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. The smoke danced with the red-blue light now flickering through the broken glass. I stood there, breathing hard, watching him disappear into the rising dawn. Outside, I stumbled toward the SUV, half hoping to find something, anything. The passenger door was ajar. A phone sat on the seat, screen still lit, mid-call. I picked it up. "Son," the voice came through, low, steady, almost amused. "You've made this difficult." My jaw clenched. I said nothing. You know, difficult men die slower. It's the price of pride. I could see his reflection in that moment, standing somewhere far away, sipping something expensive, thinking he was untouchable. I finally spoke. "I'm not your son anymore. I'm the result of your mistake. And I'm not afraid of you." He chuckled, a dry, bone-deep sound. Still just a boy with a temper. I ended the call. Let silence speak for me. Minutes later, fire trucks roared into view. I ducked behind a dumpster and met up with Samuel and June in the alley behind the diner. We didn't speak at first. We were covered in ash and glass, our lungs aching from smoke. June's laptop was gone, melted in the blast, but Samuel still had the physical files tucked under his coat. "We can't run anymore," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it didn't shake. Samuel met my eyes. "Then we don't." We pushed into the tree line just beyond the edge of the lot, disappearing into the woods while the firefighters battled what was left behind us. We walked in silence for a while. The world smelled like damp earth and gasoline. I glanced down at my hand, and there it was, the ring. The silver one Samuel had given me hours earlier, now blackened with soot and dirt. I rubbed it clean against my shirt and slid it back onto my finger. "This time," I said, almost to myself, "I wear it for me." The sun was just starting to rise, pale light stretching over the treetops, and with it came clarity. By the time the sun rose, I knew exactly where to find him, and how to end this. The drive to North Dallas was quiet, but not peaceful. The roads were empty, washed clean from the night's rain, and the sky above the treetops was turning gold with the weight of coming closure. I turned into the long private road I hadn't seen in years. The gravel under my tires sounded the same as when I was a boy riding in the back seat, too afraid to speak without permission. The gate was open. No security this time, just the wind rustling the oaks and a silence that felt too deliberate. As the mansion came into view, something inside me paused. There it was, the Drayton estate. Grand, clean, towering. A place that once made me proud. A place that raised me, fed me, broke me. Tonight, it was going to bury its maker. I parked near the fountain where I once learned how to tie a tie, my father's hand tight at the back of my neck. Not out of love, but correction. That memory had haunted me longer than I cared to admit. I stepped out slowly. The air was cool, smelled like cedar and old stone. The steps creaked faintly as I climbed them. Inside, everything was exactly the same. Pictures still lined the hall. Me at 10, with a trophy I didn't earn. My father behind me, smiling with the precision of a man posing for legacy. Each frame was a lie. I moved down the corridor, past the room where I'd once been locked in for talking back. Past the dining room where silence was served with dinner. Past the study doors, still closed. I opened them. He was there, sitting in his usual chair, neat, composed, a glass of whiskey in hand like it was a ritual, not a habit. The fire crackled beside him. He didn't stand. He didn't blink. "I wondered how long it'd take you to come home," he said, voice calm like we were catching up over holidays. I didn't answer, just walked to the desk, placed the USB on the surface between us. "Everything you built, it's over." He sipped the whiskey, not a tremble, not a flicker. "You think some files will undo me?" he said, chuckling. "I am this company. I am this family." "You were," I said, "until you tried to destroy your sons." His smirk faded. "You were never meant to lead, neither of you. You were the ones I spared." "Spared?" I stepped closer. "You left Samuel for dead. You turned Marlena into your puppet. You nearly killed me. And for what? Power? Control?" He leaned back. "Sacrifice builds legacy. Real men make hard choices." "No," I said, my voice even. "Sacrifice builds graves, and you dug enough of them." He was still speaking, still justifying, but I didn't need more. Because every word he said, every breath he took, was being transmitted, live, through the mic stitched inside my coat collar. June was on the other end, streaming to a federal server. Samuel had pre-cleared it. We knew this moment would come. And when he leaned in and muttered, "I made people disappear before. I'll do it again," I gave the smallest smile. "Thanks, Dad. That's all we needed." That's when the first siren broke through the walls. Faint at first, then closer, clearer. He rose, finally losing the calm. "You ungrateful parasite," he barked, lunging toward me. But I didn't move. I just stepped to the side, letting him stumble past, knocking the glass from his desk. It shattered near the fireplace. A splash of amber hit the flames. And that was enough. The fire jumped, roared, caught the corner of the rug, then the curtains. He spun, wide-eyed. I backed away slowly. As he tried to smother the spreading flames with a throw blanket, I looked at my hand. The ring, silver, tarnished, solid, glinted in the growing light. I pulled it off, laid it gently on the desk, beside the scattered files and the empty glass. "Loyalty ends here," I whispered. I didn't run. I walked. Through the same hallway I used to tiptoe in as a child. Down the stairs I'd once fallen down during a tantrum I wasn't allowed to have. Past the portraits of men who built legacies by erasing everything soft and true. Outside, the air was cooler. Samuel and June stood near the car. Smoke was already curling from the mansion's roof. Samuel looked at me. "Is it done?" I nodded. "It's over, but it'll never be clean." We got into the car without another word. As we pulled away, the flames rose behind us. Not out of vengeance, but something heavier, like freedom. The sirens faded behind us, but one sound stayed. The echo of my father's voice, whispering through the flames. "Even when you win, some ghosts refuse to die." 6 months later, I sat on a weathered park bench in Austin, just above Lady Bird Lake, watching sunlight dance on the water. The cicadas had started up early, their buzz settling into the cracks of silence I hadn't yet filled. It was late afternoon, warm and still, the kind of Texas autumn that held on to summer a little too long. They called it an electrical fire. The official reports wrapped everything in clean, convenient lies. The mansion was gone, reduced to ash and memory. My father's empire was now a legal case in motion, wrapped in headlines like Drayton Holdings under federal seizure and Heir exposes decades of corporate fraud. I didn't read the articles. What was the point? I'd walked away from all of it. Or more truthfully, I'd buried the part of me that ever wanted to go back. Now I ran a modest little consultancy tucked between a bike shop and a vegan bakery. No glass towers, no boardrooms with panoramic views. Just a desk, a few good clients, and June in the next office. A woman who once believed in numbers more than people, but now believed in both equally. Samuel stayed in Mexico. He said it felt like breathing again. I didn't ask questions. And me? I lived like the man I once promised myself I'd never become. Quiet, detached, cautious. But there was peace and simplicity, even if it came at a cost. When people ask how I survived, I said out loud, though no one was around, I tell them I didn't. The man who built that fortune, he died the night he saw what his family really was. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, not even a glance my way. Good. That's how I preferred it now. Invisible. I turned my attention back to the lake. Families were out, kids feeding ducks, couples walking hand in hand, someone playing acoustic guitar off in the distance. It was the kind of life I never noticed before. Not really. Not when I was chasing deals and building an empire brick by brick on top of my own exhaustion. For the first time in decades, I didn't want to win. I just wanted to breathe. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small wooden box. The latch clicked softly as I opened it. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was the silver ring. Samuel's, mine, ours. It was still slightly warped from the heat, a faint bend along the edge, like the fire tried to erase it but couldn't quite finish the job. I stared at it for a long time. Not as a token of loyalty, that word had long since lost its meaning, but as a reminder of what was lost, of what was learned. I stood and walked to the edge of the dock, held the ring between my fingers, felt its weight. Then I let it go. It fell with the smallest splash, barely a ripple, but the water knew. It widened gently, then disappeared. Just like him. My phone buzzed. Samuel's name flashed across the screen. I answered with a simple, "Hey." His voice was steady. "You ever regret walking away?" I paused, watching the lake settle. "Every day," I said, "but I'd regret staying even more." He didn't say anything, neither did I. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like peace. Back at the office, the late light cast long shadows across the floor. I walked inside, flipped on the old desk lamp, and sat. There was a photo now on my desk, the only one I'd ever framed. My mother, younger, smiling. I remembered her voice more than her words, but one thing always stuck. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind," she used to say. "It's who you become before you're gone." I think I finally understood. A soft knock at the door broke the stillness. June peeked in. "You ready for the meeting?" I nodded, closed my laptop. No more hiding. We walked out together. Not as partners in survival, but as something stronger, something rebuilt from ash. As the sun dipped below the Texas skyline, I realized I didn't destroy my father's legacy. I rebuilt mine,